Roguelikes. I have a love-hate relationship with them. The roguelike genre is a simple concept. The game is relatively short, but if you die, you go back to the very start. Other staples of the genre tend to include collecting power-ups along the way to strengthen your character, usually some sort of procedural generation is involved, and they also tend to be very difficult. These games can be very satisfying to play once you've got them in a rhythm, and there's nothing quite like putting together a build of powerful upgrades and turning an otherwise challenging game into a cakewalk. But on the other hand, losing a run like that is stressful, shall we say? So, as much as I enjoy the genre, I don't tend to play it that often, because it's the one genre that can take my usual cool head and send it into a tweaking frenzy. So recently I played Hades, and I think it might be the best roguelike I've ever played. Released in 2020 by Supergiant Games, Hades is a dungeon-crawling roguelike based in Greek mythology that has us playing as Hades' incredibly good-looking son, Zagreus. He decides one day that the underworld sucks and that he's out of here, much to the annoyance of his father, who sends all the forces of hell his way to try and stop him. Hades, since its release, has won numerous awards and has gone down among roguelike players as one of the greats for its engaging gameplay, masterful art design, and surprisingly gripping narrative, and also for its incredibly attractive cast. I mean, goddamn. Okay, I'm gonna try and behave myself for the rest of this video. No more down bad comments, I maybe promise. But yeah, Hades is a highly acclaimed title that currently has a sequel on the way that can be played right now if you're willing to tolerate some early access nonsense. But we're here to talk about the first Hades, and let's talk about that damn gameplay of this video game. The core gameplay of Hades is surprisingly simple. It's an isometric dungeon crawler where you hack and slash through the layers of the underworld while collecting blessings from the Olympian gods as your power-ups. You have a small list of attacks you can do, you've got a dodge, and you've even got a little magic spell to play around with, of which the properties of the spell can be completely altered depending on what Olympian powers you add to it. The gameplay loop on its own is pretty decent, and Zagreus himself feels good to control, but I think where the game really shines is how you can build Zagreus to be fine-tailored to be the perfect underworld ravager. More so than in any other roguelike I've played, it feels like there's a solid degree of control in the player's hands on how they play the game here. Before you even jump into a run, you have a choice of a bunch of different weapons to pick from and a skill tree. The skill tree comes in the form of Nyx's Mirror of the Night, where you can spend darkness points to boost Zagreus' abilities. These abilities are really interesting and are surprisingly well balanced as well, giving you enough of a boost to lighten the burden a bit, but not so powerful that once you max it out, you can effortlessly steamroll the game. And to add to the customizability aspect, each skill on the mirror has an alternate version, which usually has the same concept but executed differently. For instance, do you want to have 3 revives that last over the course of a run, or do you want to have 1 revive in every room? Do you want to do bonus damage when you attack an enemy from behind, or maybe you want to do bonus damage when you hit an enemy for the first time? Maybe you want to have 1 charge of your spell that constantly regenerates, or maybe you want 3 that you have to go pick back up after you cast them. These alternate versions of the skills can be freely mixed, matched, pick and mixed, and fine-tuned to the way you play the game, and that adds a lot of creative freedom to your playstyle. As for the different weapons, there's a surprising amount of depth here too. You have 6 major weapons to pick from. A sword, a spear, a shield, a bow, a pair of gauntlets, and finally, a fucking gun. Like, I'm not kidding. The game being set in ancient Greece isn't gonna stop old Zag here from pumping some lead into his foes. The weapons can generally be split into 3 categories: melee, ranged, and all of the above. But each weapon also has unlockable alternate variants that can minorly or majorly alter the way you use them, giving them extra bonus effects or even changing the moveset in some cases. Maybe it'll be something as simple as giving your attack magnetic properties, or maybe the weapon will change to support your cast so that you can make Zagreus part of the Shade Wizard Obol gang. Is that meme still funny? So before you even jump into a run, you have a lot of personalization on how you play, but once you jump into a run, you'll quickly see that Olympian boons are pretty useful actually, and you'll find that each god has a specific niche that their boons fill. For example, Artemis and Ares are both good for pure DPS, Athena and Poseidon tend to be good for more defensive playstyles, and Dionysus and Aphrodite both can hand out some pretty despicable debuffs, and so on. Sorting the power-ups into different flavors like this makes it easier to put together a specific kind of build, but of course, you're still at the mercy of RNGs as to get the god boon you want, right? RNGesus. Wouldn't it be more like RNG Zeus? Well, my dear viewer, this is where I reveal that I lied! There is one more thing you can alter before jumping in. Keepsakes. These little trinkets are unlocked by raising your friendship levels with the characters you'll meet along the way, and they can give you all sorts of wacky effects. And for one example, by raising your friendship level with the Olympian gods, you can get keepsakes that force the next boon to spawn to be one of theirs, giving you a bit more control over what boons you're getting. You also aren't locked into a keepsake for an entire run either, you can change them between levels. So if you get a good build going in Area 1 and start thinking, hey, a boon from Athena could be really good to complete this build right now, between level 1 and 2 you can switch over to Athena's keepsake to guarantee that your next boon will be one of hers. There are other cool keepsake effects as well, such as extra health, a free revive, bonus damage at low health, and other such fun things to experiment with. In other roguelike games, it can really feel like you're having to work with what the game's throwing at you, and sometimes the game is throwing you utter shit, literally in some cases. But Hades feels like it's giving enough control to the player to easily plan ahead and nudge the game in the direction and the build you want, but the RNG is still stern enough to not let you chokeslam the game into submission with the same overpowered build every time. You need to be flexible in case you don't get the one boon that will answer all your problems. The fun gameplay loop combined with the endless build customizability makes this game really replayable and addictive, and once you finally beat your first run and are used to everything the Underworld has to offer, surprise! Here's a hard mode with increased rewards, and would you believe that this is customizable to how you see fit as well? Do you want harder bosses? Do you want time limits? Do you just hate yourself and want your skill tree to just not work sometimes? Do you want for enemies to be able to just not consent to being hit? All of the above? My friend, pick your poison and down it like it's the finest ambrosia you've ever tasted. If I do have any complaints with the gameplay, it's two main things, being that sometimes it can be hard to tell what projectiles are yours and what are enemy projectiles, and also, some of the enemy designs can be a bit tedious. I fully confess that this might just be a skill issue on my part, but I swear, I hate 90% of the enemies in Elysium. But with that aside, yeah, it's no wonder that this game is so damn fun. But there's more to this game than its gameplay, because it's also surprisingly narratively rich. I never really go into a roguelike thinking, damn, I can't wait to know what the story of this game is going to be like. That's not to say that roguelikes can't have good writing. Skull the Hero Slayer had an interesting enough story, and while I don't know a damn thing about Dead Cells' story, I'm sure it is interesting. But Hades genuinely took me by surprise with how well written it was. So, as mentioned earlier, the plot is that Prince Zagreus wishes to stick it to his old man Hades by just up and leaving the underworld. At the start it seems like he simply just wants to go live on Mount Olympus instead, but we eventually learn that he has a more personal motivation. This being to find his mother Persephone, who left the underworld to go live off the grid somewhere on the surface shortly after Zagreus was born. Without trying to spoil the story further, it leads to some interesting twists and turns, with the gods of Olympus being more than happy to help Zagreus escape, but his friends and remaining family in the underworld obviously feel a bit betrayed by his decision to just up and leave. You get to know the Olympian gods as the game goes on and promise to be best buds with them all and all hang out together once you reach Olympus, but along the way you get to know the people of the underworld as well and start to feel a bit bad knowing your ultimate goal is to leave them behind. And let me tell you, you will get invested in these characters because the character writing in this game is godly levels of great. Every character is endearing. Every character has an interesting side story to tell. They all have great designs that make you want to talk to them more so you can just bask in their glory, and everyone is really well voice acted as well. And not only is the character writing good, but there's a lot of it. No matter what little thing you do in this game, someone, somewhere is going to have something to say about it. Characters can make comments based on things such as what weapon you're using, what boons you've picked up, where you last died, and probably what you had for breakfast this morning as well. You could be playing this game for hours before you even hear one line of dialogue repeated. One of my favorite things about reaching the end of a run, regardless of whether I won or lost, was heading back to the House of Hades to see what everyone had on their minds. You know you've got a good cast of characters when I could listen to them talk about anything and still be completely enamored. I could watch this cast do their goddamn taxes without getting bored. And as mentioned earlier, there is a friendship mechanic where you can get to know these characters on a deeper level, some of which you can even go further than friendship with. Two of which you can even get to 4th base with. At the same time. Zagreus, more like Zagrizius. And to give you an idea of how good the characters are in this game, I figured I'd list some of my favorites and why I like them. Obviously, there's the main character himself, Zagreus. Despite his design, voice, behaviors, and everything making him seem like some punk-ass edgy bad boy, he's actually a rather stand-up guy. Like, yeah, he can be pretty snarky and sarcastic.
Fine day or night to you as well, Charon. I hate this thing. You don't mind if I call you Lerny from now on, right? I'll take that as a no, not at all. Thank you for asking, friend.
But he's always willing to help a friend in need. He's only really an asshole to people who step on his shoes first, and as an immortal god, he never really takes it personally whenever a boss character kills him, because, well, A, he's a god and will just regenerate, and B, most of them are hired by Hades to stop the shenanigans that Zagreus is pulling. Zeg acknowledges that most of them are just doing their job at the end of the day. These facets of his personality combined make Zagreus a really likable protagonist to follow through the plot of the game. Fun fact, by the way, this game was originally going to be a game adaptation of the story of Theseus and Asterius, but it was changed to be about Zagreus super early on. And I think this was a really good call to make Zagreus the protagonist, because he's one of the Greek mythological figures who's the most vague when it comes to any concrete lore on who they even were. In some depictions he's not even Hades' son, he's Zeus's, and in some he's just the same person as Dionysus. But going with a more lesser-known character allowed them to have a lot of creative freedom with Zagreus, and he's a better character for it. A duo of characters I really enjoyed was Orpheus and Eurydice. The story concept, I damned me and my wife to eternal damnation and ruined our marriage because I looked back when explicitly told not to, shouldn't be as gripping as it is. I also quite enjoy the titular Hades himself. I like that this depiction of him isn't just Greek Satan like a lot of media tends to depict him as. Like, yeah, I love Hades in the Disney movie, but he's not Hades in that version, he's Satan. Hades is still the antagonist of this game. He's an asshole to Zagreus, but also Zagreus is also an asshole to him. Hades in this game isn't so much evil as he is just grumpy and spiteful, and how his dynamic with Zagreus evolves throughout the game is really interesting. I do find it weird that Hades just gets depicted as Greek Satan a lot, though. Could you imagine if we just depicted Zeus as Greek god or Heracles as Greek Jesus? I was also quite invested in Thanatos as well. You can tell that he was the one who was hurt most by Zagreus' choice to leave, and mending the broken bond between the two is an interesting story to follow. I also enjoyed talking to Sisyphus whenever I ran into him. For a guy pushing a rock for the rest of time, he's a surprisingly chill and friendly guy. And let me tell you, dying to the last boss over and over again when trying to beat my first run sure as hell made me feel like Sisyphus. One must imagine Sisyphus giving you darkness. But I think my favorite character in the game has to go to one of the Olympians. The Olympians are all super fun characters, but just like their Greek myth counterparts, you can tell that most of them are arrogant jackasses. Like, they're charming characters, don't get me wrong, I enjoy funny Uncle Poseidon and frat bro Dionysus, but I never want to know any of them personally, if that makes sense. All except for one. Artemis. I don't know what happened, but the writers of this game fucking cooked when they made this character. Or rather, when they adapted this character. Her whole deal is laid out pretty quickly. Compared to the prideful, loud, and party-crazy gods of Olympus, Artemis is pretty quiet and introverted, not really getting along with anyone else on Olympus very well as a result. Zagreus and Artemis feel more so than the other gods like they become friends as their dialogue continues, even with the context that the gods can't even hear Zagreus when he speaks.
You're being very nice to me and that makes me suspicious, understand? So you want more of that, you keep this up.
Artemis really has this energy of that one cousin you always look forward to seeing at an otherwise boring family gathering. And spoiler alert for the main plot, by the way, skip to the time shown. Okay, you had your chance. She was the Olympian I felt the most bad about letting down when you learn the truth that it's literally impossible for Zagreus to escape. Like, so much of Artemis's dialogue talks about how excited she is to take Zagreus hunting, but alas, Zagreus is tied to the underworld forever and that day will likely never come. So Artemis was naturally the character I maxed out the friendship level of first, and whenever I got one of those Trial of the God rooms where you have to pick between one of two god boons at the consequence of pissing off the other one, you can bet whenever one of the choices was Artemis, the other one was not getting picked. Yes, I am aware this is how the Trojan War started, thank you for asking. Even if they'd be more optimal for the build. Am I too empathetic for fictional characters for my own good? Maybe. But also, maybe don't write peak fiction and I won't be so emotionally invested next time. Okay, let's not beat around the bush here. This game is fucking beautiful. Visually stunning. Everything in this game is beautifully drawn. The environments, the characters. I just love looking at this game. I need it just injected right into my eyes, and that is a very disturbing mental image. While it is kind of a tired point at this point in games discussion, this is just, it's proof that you don't need 4K ultra-realistic graphics that take up 200 gigabytes of space to make a game look pretty. It's also really impressive that they get the 3D models of the characters and stuff to mesh in well with these illustrated environments. There's very little art style clash there. And this game's soundtrack? It fucks. I like particularly how combat themes have two parts. There's the more chill part where it's more acoustic in instrumentation. And then the second part where it goes full metal once the real fight kicks in. It feels very Doom-inspired. Hell, I swear I can even hear hints of E1M1 in Out of Tartarus. There's also some vocal tracks from Orpheus and Eurydice that you'll sometimes hear them singing while you're doing their questline, so hey, if that motivates you to become a marriage counselor for the day, go right ahead. This game is just chock full of a bunch of little details as well. You'll find tons of neat little bits and pieces to find, whether you're in the middle of a run or just chilling in the House of Hades. One feature of this game is the ability to buy new decor for the House of Hades, and some pieces of decor can be interacted with. You can also use it to renovate the underworld in general to make runs go smoother. For instance, Zagreus can get a lyre to play, not too dissimilar to Orpheus's, but unfortunately...
This is hard.
He sucks at playing the lyre. But if you have him throw himself at it enough times and talk with Orpheus enough,
Getting there.
eventually Zagreus will start to get a hang of playing it, and that's such a cool little detail. And the game is just absolutely filled with little bits like this that make it incredibly fun to look into anything and everything you can find in this game. So to keep it short and sweet, Hades is a super addictive roguelike with a lot of love and care put into its gameplay, narrative, and more that has absolutely sold me on its place not only as my favorite roguelike, but probably one of my new favorite games of all time. With its simple but challenging and highly customizable gameplay and its super endearing colorful depiction of Greek mythology, this game is a must play, and here's hoping that its upcoming sequel is even better. I'm impressed with myself. I somehow managed to make it the entire way through this video without making a Hades nuts joke. Wait, I just made one. Oh, blood and darkness!